Hello
And welcome.
to the Minimum Wage Podcast.
Or even the names above our pay grade.
Today we're joined by
Dennis McBride.
our former high school principal and former middle
Was
school
that your
principal too.
Was that your
For 1 year.
1 year? Okay.
Yeah, we had you for senior
You got to
year.
give
and that
Dan
was
some
it.
props, right?
Yeah, I mean, he took us through 3 out of the 4. So, yeah, man. But happy to have you on. This is definitely
it's
the
been a
biggest
little while
guest.
coming, right? So,
Yeah.
tried to get me a
Long
couple times. I wasn't shirking you.
Yeah, well, we finally got you here.
Well, here I am.
And we want to talk about AI because we know we use AI a lot. You might
Right.
even use AI more than we do.
Oh, I doubt I use it more than you do. I just
I
am
don't
interested
know.
in it. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what would you say in your daily life, what are you using AI for the most?
Well, I started out, and this probably isn't the best example of it, but Emma would call me from school, right? And you're taking a sociology course, and your dad is helping you figure out something at 10:30 at night and it's due at 11:50.
Oh my.
So like I use it just to tell myself, like I'll go in and get the parameters for what our assignment is, or what the subject matter is, and I'll read it. It'll give me a pretty good breakdown. A lot of times I just use it to quickly give me a what would be the good way to put it, a synthesis maybe of the learning she's supposed to have done or did do and didn't understand, or so it's pretty
Okay.
amazing in that I can tell it, like if I don't like how it's explaining something to me, say, hey, explain it to me as a 5th grader. I'm pretty amazed at what it can do.
Yeah. And
Great.
you're using it better than most because there are a lot of people that they'll just be like, hey, this is all the information I have. I need you to write something based off of it. They
Oh, no,
don't
I've
ask.
played with it in every way. It's
Okay, yeah.
pretty. I will say this, you have to be careful because I know the schools now, like high school our size, we're nowhere near trying to figure out how to
Regulate
figure
it.
out, especially regulating it for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think discipline-wise that we'd be in a place right now to trust any product. Although, here's what I was going to tell you, is, Kelly used Turnitin for years,
Yeah.
right? And Emma was telling me that some of her classmates were getting caught for using AI. And so I went and looked at it a little bit, and I wasn't really sure that if I was advising them, I would first advise them not to necessarily turn in something all AI,
Yeah.
knowing that they fully well probably would at times, but that I would advise them to fight that. I don't care if they did it or not, because there is no way, even the best one, and that's Originality, which is a Turnitin product, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I played with that one for hours, way more than I should have. I'd get home and Susie'd fall asleep. I'd be up till like 3, 4 in the morning. And what I would do is take old papers and I would just run them through, turn it in to see, okay, well, what is it going to say?
Yeah.
Most of the time, 98%, 100% human written.
Yeah.
Now, there were some other ones that if, for instance, if you're a college student and you didn't have access to Originality,
Yeah.
and you went and just ran it through some of these other AI checkers, you'd think you were safe. They're terrible.
Really?
Now, some were good and some were bad. You could make a few changes and, it would say, oh, yeah, 98% human. You run that through Originality and it knows the truth.
Yeah.
And, it's... Okay. So here's what I did. I went in and I took I took like 15 things I had written. Right. And I have papers from Marin and Mac and Emma and, for years ago, Marin graduated in like 2012. So, all their stuff is now on their, computer. It used to be all on mine.
Yeah.
So I have access to it.
These are his kids, by the way, side note.
Oh, there you go. So not just random students.
Yeah.
And so now, especially with ChatGPT 4, your input is you can use a lot more. Used to be you had, maybe I think it was like
2,500 words or something.
Yeah, something like that. But I haven't been tested on the limit yet by 4. I don't know what it is.
I think it's 25,000.
30,000, 25,000.
Yeah, something like that.
And anyway, so I asked it to read a few of my papers, and I said, well, write one in, using that style, using me.
Yeah.
Originality saw right through it.
No.
So now there was one paper, and I did read something about Originality said that, you're looking at, there's 2, I might miss the actual words at this point, burstiness, that's one of them.
Yeah.
So they're searching for burstiness and also predictability. So there are 2 things. And what it is that humans are very unpredictable when we write.
Yeah.
We're not automatons. So The other thing is we're really bursty. Like we change our sentence structure. We go from a 15-word sentence to a 25-word sentence to a 4-word sentence, and AI doesn't do that. It's very predictable,
Yeah.
right? So I tried to even play with that and say, well, let me try to write. Let me write as predictable as I can.
It's
Like I want to write
interesting.
really simple. Now, no problem there. It never said AI. But what is interesting is that some of the papers that either they wrote or I wrote or some of the things would say 75% AI, 25% human, and I wrote the whole thing.
Wow.
Interesting.
So that I think is why even originality says, and that's why I said I would advise those students to push hard back against it. Now, of course, if it's all about your academic integrity, well, but if it's all about like trying to not get thrown out of school, I think the people would be right in saying, look, there's no way that this thing can prove it. And they say it, like originality says. We don't want you using it for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to like a judicial court type thing, they're gonna be like, either you wrote this or you're gonna get kicked out of school. You can 110% say, hey, that AI
Prove it.
tool, prove that
Right.
I did not write it. That AI tool really has no bearing on the conversation.
Well, the thing about now that you're talking about the detector.
Yeah, Turnitin's originality.
If you use, for instance, I've read a lot of stuff I think is, there's some crap involved in it. Like, for instance, you take ChatGPT 3.5 or 4.
Yeah.
And they say that what you can do, some of these people who aren't, now this is not originality. These aren't the people who are writing the AI detector programs. But they say, oh, well, if you run that paper back through, for instance, run a paper and you just dump it into ChatGPT 4 and say, did you write this? And it'll basically know if it wrote it, and that's not true.
Yeah, not at all.
Because it's original.
It would just say,
That's one of the
I wrote that.
Right.
That was
I
me.
mean, that's one of the things I think is amazing about it. Is they say there's no plagiarism involved.
Yeah.
Now there is, in a sense, by the student if he uses it.
Yeah.
But what comes out of
honestly,
go ahead.
I don't know that I agree with that, actually. If you're using the words from the tool, like you just say like some very non-specific prompt,
Right.
like, hey, just write me 1,000 words on Thomas Jefferson,
Right.
and then just copy and paste whatever he has. But I think the more granular you get with the prompt, the more you can argue that maybe that's not exactly plagiarism.
Okay, well, so you're right. Let's say we took the your model of Thomas Jefferson. If you just said, write me a 1,000-word essay on Thomas Jefferson, and it was like, for something like 8th grade or 9th grade or something like that, what you would get out of that is, again, a lot of just synthesis, right? It wouldn't be like it. You could run it through a plagiarism detector, and it wouldn't, you would run it through Turnitin, and it's not going to light up for plagiarism.
Yeah.
But now that's another thing I've spent, way too much time playing with. Now, I'm just playing with the large language models. I'm not very like the more techie, areas of like art. I'll play with DALL-E or what's the other big one?
I don't know. I use Leonardo. That's one I got on the wait list.
I'm trying to think what the other one's called, but Midjourney.
Oh, okay.
And I've played with those, and they're pretty interesting. And I've never gone, beyond like just a very basic prompt, just playing with it. But I have taken things and said, okay, well, let's see what you would get. Okay, so you take a real simple prompt in ChatGPT 4 and say, we'd have to come up with somebody throw a subject that we would write about, or for a class.
What was the conflict of the Revolutionary War?
Okay, so if you just put that in, the main conflict of the Revolutionary War,
yeah,
and it would probably tell you, it would correct you and say there's no main conflict. It would list 4 conflicts, and it would be pretty clear. But yeah, I think what you're saying, and I agree with it a little bit. Now, I don't run away from the AI. As a matter of fact, I've showed it to I have gone through in class up on the big screen, and I've said, okay, let's look at like the top 30 programs that are out there, and let's look how you can use them. Because 1, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
2, they can be very useful. Like one of them would be, and I haven't played with this one very much, although I have played with it a little bit. There's a new one that I want to try, and it's a local AI. So somehow you've got this program that you can train on your documents.
Yeah.
And simply that. So what it is, I think it makes them searchable. Well, for somebody who is, a writer or someone who is a researcher, being able to go back and have that go through and look at all you're going to miss things yourself. but it could be very useful to be able to pull out ideas that you may have even forgotten.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with our podcast. Like we've done now, this is going to be like episode 43, 42 or 43.
No, it's gonna be after that because we have the.
Okay, it's going to be episode 43 or 44. Anyway,
45,
these are all about an hour long.
Right.
And we've said so much in those, in
I
that
don't even
amount
know.
of time.
I don't even know.
You know, we're kind of worried. We're actually thinking about like the stuff that we might have said earlier.
I have no
We
clue.
want an AI that can go through and say, hey, maybe this is like a little off to right field. You might want to pull it.
On your YouTube channel, does it have a script for every one of your?
Yeah.
The
Okay.
transcript,
So-
it's maybe not the greatest, but it is something.
Right. Well, so you could
But
use.
you could download the audio files, run it through OpenAI's audio one,
They have an audio one.
Right. So they have ones that will go
They
through
do.
and do their transcription.
and it's very cheap, and you can call it for
Well,
very
some
cheap.
of them are free still, some of the new ones. And that's the other thing. People are still building out apps and programs based on, AI's API or other ones, So there's, and I think one of the things that's really cool there is that, a lot of those are, like free programs for a little while because they want people to test them.
Oh, yeah.
So you can take anything you want, any audio, and it will just pull it out. And some of them are really good. Now, for instance, I was messing around. I thought, well, what if I recorded this on a Android phone? You have the ability just to, it will capture everything. It'll put every punctuation in it as we talk. So I could sit here and put this here and turn it on, and it's just live transcribe. That's what it's called. And as long as we don't have huge pauses in our where it's waiting for somebody to say the next thing, and just throws a period or an ellipses or something in there, it pretty much figures out 3 different people are talking, and it can figure all that out. So those are AIs they're using, right? But that's before we were using the word so much.
Well, technically, they're not even AIs. Technically, we don't even have an AI. We just have machine learning models.
Yeah. So AI, that's kind of like a term that we've used a lot more, probably because the company that's biggest is called OpenAI.
Right.
But AI, I would say in the form that we just have machine learning models.
Yeah.
So we don't have necessarily AI, that's artificial intelligence.
Right.
But I mean, it really all goes down to how you define the term.
Well, I think that for what we're talking really about is these large language models and their ability, and I say their ability, they've been programmed.
Yeah.
But they've been programmed also to be able to understand that's the thing about the predictability as well. Like if I said, especially in context, for instance, if I said, hey, we're going to go to school, go across the street, get a drink, and I'm going to drop you off you'd finish that with, now I didn't give you a lot of context there, but like let's say you were a basketball player right now, you'd know that if we went to the store, I was going to go to the store and then drop you off at the gym or drop you off at your house.
Yeah.
AI is, it doesn't know what to say next. So it might say something crazy. And that's why all these students are getting caught sometimes without even the detectors, because they're leaving in they'll post a paper and they'll leave in the AI will say something that it'll have all the prompts at the beginning of it. And it's like, so that's great,
Yeah.
Has all the
but I was
prompts
going to go
and
back to
results. That's
that idea of, whether or not we can really decide whether or not something is
Written by AI.
written by AI or not, or and when I read it, of course, I think that's the thing. Teachers know their students over a course, like Kelly, for instance, who's taught the students probably way too many classes in a row because we don't have very many English teachers. If all of a sudden Colin turns in something, that she would know right away whether, or you didn't write that.
Yeah.
Now, then maybe you'd put it on Colin to prove that he wrote it. And I think one of the ways to go about that would be less, because we've gotten very comfortable with, people typing their papers and all that, is, well, maybe you have to do a lot more work in class
Oh, yeah.
to kind of show, or, and even in the colleges, and y'all know better than I do, but I've seen it with Mac and Emma, 2 of my kids, that a lot of what they do on even in-class learning is actually done, and turned in through the, the school's, what's the
D2L.
Yeah, D2L or something like that. So it does open up the ability for someone to maybe cheat more than if you were having to do some of those things in class.
Oh yeah, tons.
And you wouldn't have to do much to find out whether they really knew something or not.
Yeah, I mean, you just ask them, like, you simply go to class, like, the next time, ask them the same question you
Right.
asked them
Oh, they wouldn't
online.
know.
Yeah, they wouldn't know.
No, they wouldn't know. I
No
don't
way.
think so.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot because there were times when I would, like, it's come the 11th hour. I need to do something to turn this thing in.
Right.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
well, hypothetically then,
Yeah.
smile through that. Like I was
Hypothetically, gentlemen.
looking at, all right, so you take that prompt we said about the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
And I know we were going somewhere, and I just remember what that was, so we'll come back to that. But so I told you I played with my own stuff.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to play with papers that were written by AI and put them through, these different detectors. And some of them said, 95% human, and it was all written by AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So then I said, well, Emma, she uses, I think everybody does now. Who doesn't use Grammarly? Do y'all use Grammarly?
Of course.
Right.
No.
So is that?
I just use.
You use Word or something. Just use its own
Well, he uses
stuff.
ChatGPT.
I just use
so he,
I just use
throws
ChatGPT.
whatever
I
he's
say,
written
hey.
into
Oh, right.
ChatGPT.
I just say, hey, point out every problem in my paper.
Now, I think that's a fair use and safe. If you can use Grammarly, now that is something I've played with as well. Is like, and I, this is funny. And you tell me what you think about this.
Yeah.
Okay, so a student can't use, and obviously you're trying to teach the student how to write. You want to see if they can take the ideas that you've taught them. But a teacher can take that same paper and say to ChatGPT, "Hey, I want you to, edit this paper for me," and you tell it, you give it a prompt. Say, "I'm a 11th grade,
Well, that's the thing.
and
is
it'll
ChatGPT can grade papers pretty well. I'll even ask it, hey, grade my paper, and then
Right.
tell me what's wrong, and then I go fix it, and then I say, hey, grade my paper again.
because
hey,
you can
grade
tell
my
it, don't
paper
change
again."
anything.
Yeah.
Just
And so I
mark
just-
it.
yeah.
Just
So have you seen
Mark it
teachers
up.
do that already?
I have not, but I know they do. I mean,
Really?
Well, because you look at the forums,
Why
people are
wouldn't
talking
you?
about it all the time.
I'm talking about in your school.
No, I don't think. I think that I've talked to Tony a lot about it. People are probably tired of listening to me talk about it. It's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I think Kelly hasn't touched on it much.
Really?
Claire, because
Old
we're
heads.
busy, but I don't ever sleep.
Yeah.
So like I'll look at it all night, and it is fascinating, and I like to run through, all of those programs and try to play with them. So I thought, well, could a student come back and say, well, that doesn't seem fair, but again, it's a different thing. But maybe a boss would say, well, gosh, that makes you more efficient. You have to do that.
Yeah.
Or, well, why did your productivity, fall off there? Why aren't these papers all being graded? Well, I was using this, and I think there's a lot of implications in it that are pretty cool.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was going to say was, okay, so you take a paper that ChatGPT wrote, and I mean I've done it, so I've actually played with it. And I could give you examples, and then you put it through Grammarly. And you take first of all, ChatGPT is supposed to be, that's the other thing that if a paper comes to somebody has no mistakes in it, well, that's clue one, because everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And, but, then I say, well, your argument there is you use Grammarly.
Sure.
Okay. Well, Grammarly is supposed to pick up most of the most common mistakes. But, I ran a paper that Marin wrote back in, I think it was her, what do you call her, 11th grade research paper, not research. What
That's what it was.
Was
wasn't
a
it?
research paper? She did
Yeah,
it on,
yeah.
I think, like the sun also rises or something like that. And so I read her paper, and then I prompted ChatGPT to write. I mean, just read what her thesis was, all the different main ideas, and I went through and I asked it, and I was very particular, right? So
Okay.
it was a very long prompt. So that's what you were saying a minute ago. Once you get to so many, let's say the paper is supposed to be
Stipulations.
3,000 words, and your prompt is, 500 or 600 words,
Yeah.
right?
Even then, though, it's not just the one prompt. It's the conversation that you have saying, okay, that was a good paper. I like how you lead into this, but you don't spend enough time talking about that. And I don't like, this word and that word. Can
Well, you could ask it to
change
act
that?
like an English teacher.
Reword
Yeah.
this, do that.
But my point was, okay, well, how much then are you going to argue with that student that that's not their paper? They
Yeah.
prompted everything. They obviously knew what they were doing, but maybe they just wanted to. Now, I don't think this is fair use, by the way, for a student. I'm just saying that the lines get grayer the more you prompt.
Yeah.
And you were saying that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That,
the more granular you get it, I think the
Sure.
more of you is really coming through in the paper. So how can you say that's really plagiarism when you're the one that got it to that point? Nobody else playing with it would get the same
That
paper.
is the thing about ChatGPT or some of the other models is that what they kick out is supposed to be not considered coming out of them as plagiarism because they're not going to plagiarize.
Sure.
They know not to do that,
Yeah.
right? Way better than a student can.
Oh, of course.
But I think that a student could definitely go in and say, give me, read this article. Now, find the 2 best quotes in there about this particular
It
work.
is great at
Now,
finding
I think that is
quotes.
fair use.
Yeah.
In that, we want people to read. I get it. But I have a friend, I won't mention his name, he graduated from Hallelujah many, many years ago. And he's a very successful guy today. However, his big brag is I only read 1 book in high school and college. Now, other than obviously some textbook stuff, but he read 1 book.
And
that was some book we had to read for some old, one of our life packs back in the day. And I think it was like Our Town. And now, being a big reader myself, a lot of ideas are always just flying around in my mind, but I know most of those are from things I've read.
Oh, yeah.
And, maybe from things that, I've been programmed or something to know. But I think that when you have somebody who is just simply like looking for, again, you can read a paper and still go, gosh, I don't really know what was really important about my paper in that paper. Say, pull out the 2 best ideas based on my thesis. Here's my thesis.
Yeah.
And it says, well, here's 2. That's great.
Yeah.
Then you can paraphrase out of those.
So I did something similar to that with part of my thesis prospectus for the research I'm doing in college now.
Right.
And so I write the stuff myself. And then I'll copy and paste my citations.
Your professor's, right? He writes it all himself.
I copy and paste my citations into GPT-4.
Right.
So it can find the articles, and then I'll copy and paste what I've written into it, and I'll say add citations where they apply. So I don't have to think about the citations. I'm just using with my knowledge, I'm using what I've read and writing and then doing that.
ChatGPT 4 is probably better than 3 and 3.5. And I think that what's the Bing? What's the is it?
Yeah,
Bing,
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm
so
using.
When you ask it something, especially something academic, it will give you some citations. It'll say, well, look at these articles.
Oh yeah.
ChatGPT 3 was not good at that.
No,
and what it would do is it would just hallucinate. I mean, basically just make things up because it wanted to please you, I think.
Yes.
And there are some horror stories about what it did.
It still makes stuff up all the
Yeah,
time.
it does. And I even, when you catch it and you ask it, it's like a very repentant kid. It says, oh, hey, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Here, let's look, and it'll go try to find it.
And when it gets the wrong answer, it's always like, you are correct.
Yeah. Well, so how about this one? There's this site now I don't know much about. It's from Quora.
Okay.
We talked about that at the party. Poe is what it's called. And it gives you like 4 different AI models that you can kind of choose from. And what their strengths and weaknesses are. Okay. So let's say you're using Poe, and you go through all these different language models trying to see. And I will say that they all spit out a little bit different product. I mean, there's 1, 2, I think there's 4 or 5, and they're all a bit different. But what got me onto that site was I probably saw something. You always in your feeds on news see these Quora questions, and one caught my eye, and I clicked on it, and I don't know why in the world. I mean, that would be really interesting to see. How do they decide what I'm going to see? And I know that's on clicks, but some of the stuff I would never even think about.
Yeah, you're talking about the algorithms for these
Sure,
things.
like why is it going to feed me this question instead of that question, or whatever. But what's really interesting to me there on the thing on Poe is Poe started out as, I think, was you could create your own little chat bots.
Okay.
But based on things like, and I think I told you that when that I do Wordle every day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a Wordle solver. And now I can tell you this, I have only the little bit that I've read, and I'm not a professional prompt writer. And so, but what it says that it will do is when you're using their little, chat bot, is that you can put in prompts and it will learn itself to solve these problems.
Yeah.
It is terrible trying to solve Wordle. It'll never, sometimes it'll never even try an E. And, I'll say, well, it seems ridiculous. You're not trying an E. And they say, oh, that is pretty ridiculous. Let me try an E. And it'll kick out words that aren't even words. And so then I tried another one. It was called Human Writer.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to name it. And I said, well, I'm going to try it. I said, I asked the AI to learn to write with more burstiness and less predictability. And it was terrible. It got caught every time. I mean, and I'm glad, I guess, in some ways. What would we do? Okay, so, you're going to graduate from college, and, let's say I don't know what you're planning on doing, but let's say you end up in some way or another, whether it's teaching or having employees, what are you going to do if the AI gets so good that it isn't detectable? I see that coming.
Well, I mean, you can already use it in ways to where like it's not able to be found, just like, by using less of just the straight up AI made stuff.
Right.
But I'd say probably the best way to combat that is to from an early age teach how it should be used.
Well, so I think that's why I wanted the kids to see it. I wanted them to see that I showed them how it was detected.
Yeah.
And so maybe the last thing about the large language model and writing a paper and things like that would be that, so I took a paper that was all AI and said, well, how much work is it going to take? Okay. Now, for me, I don't think okay. So I'm 57 years old. I can talk. And so words just come. And ideas come easily to me. But I don't think I'm any smarter than anybody else. So, for instance, I take this paper and I trying to think what I was trying to get it to write on. It wasn't anything all that complicated, but it was something I didn't know a lot about. I just picked something, and so then it wrote this paper. I threw it into the Turnitin, right? And it said originality, said 98% AI. So, well, it was definitely not 100%. Well, it was 100%.
Yeah.
But, it can't, it's interesting, right? It's not a perfect science. Some of them that I ran through said 75, and it was all AI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and sometimes it actually went the other way. When I wrote it, it said it was like 50 or 60% AI. And that's not, well, then you're getting really nervous as a student if these teachers are really going to look at it really hard. You go in kind of like, well, what can I do? I wrote that.
Yeah.
But I thought, how much work will it take to take what they wrote and then make it 100% human? I didn't find it to be that difficult. Now, we were talking about using Grammarly.
Yeah. Do you want to tell me your process though? Because I kind of found that interesting.
Right. Okay. So here's what I did. First, I took Emma's. I got her account, and because again, I'm playing with this. I warned Emma, I would not try this on your own because it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And, especially with, colleges and academic integrity, I don't know, different schools are different, but, why get kicked out for, just being late on a paper? I'd rather you be late than, do something where they're going to call you in front of the tribunal.
Yeah.
But so what I did was I took the same thing that I wrote and I ran it raw through Grammarly, and I accepted. I mean, it's a lot of work to accept every prompt from Grammarly.
Yeah,
it felt like it changed the paper dramatically.
It does. Well, so if you pay for it,
this is a paid account.
It'll have so
style
many things,
and,
or it'll just take a sentence, get rid of half of your words, and rewrite it a completely different way.
Yeah.
That's
got
not
style, correctness, conciseness, clarity.
Right. Well, even
now
the thing it doesn't have, which is interesting, and maybe it doesn't, I don't know this, is it doesn't have grade level.
Really?
So you think right as an 8. Well, there's probably different benchmarks. 5th grade, 8th grade,
I think it's just
grade.
Meant for professional use.
Well, you can go for professional.
And you can set your own.
Kind of a laid back approach. So anyway, I ran it through. And I remember sitting there going, this is way too much work. But I thought, well, it's going to work.
Yeah.
This is definitely not the same paper came out. I ran that thing through Originality. It said 100% AI. It didn't say 100%, but it said 75, which to me means you're going to get questioned. That's 100%.
Yeah.
50, you're probably safe. And I was kind of amazed by that because it seemed like it changed so much. So that didn't work. So I took the same paper. Now, I can do this, and I think most of y'all can do it. I don't think... Now, it just would take some practice. And I know from teaching English that, for instance, if I just give you a prompt for an essay, I got 1 million students over the years who'll just say, I can't think of anything to write about.
Yeah.
Or my life isn't that interesting. If it's like a narrative essay, it's like, dude, your life is way more interesting than mine. I know about them, but I just have the ability to tell a story.
Yeah.
They haven't figured that out yet.
That's true.
And anybody can tell a story. Like, anything. You can make breakfast sound like a murder mystery if you want to, but and some are
But that is an acquired skill. That's a very hard to acquire for some folks.
Well,
too.
Steve Swenson would be a master at it, right? Because his brain was kicking out all these like punchlines, that I wouldn't even think of. All right, so
if it was a hunting story, Nate Dogg would do it.
There you go. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm making stories up, can we go off topic for a second?
Go
Okay.
off topic, please.
Nate's a great one. Nate, if he ever watches this, he'll have a kick out of this. All right. I mean, I'm just trying to be honest here. I try not to at school because look, I got new students all the time. I got a million stories. They're all true, mostly about other people.
Oh yeah.
And that I don't feel the need necessarily to embellish. Now, I know my memory might, I might not remember everything perfectly, and I might remember a story about, one of my friends, Tommy Jackson, and it was actually Kip Plowman that did it, but that would be an honest mistake.
Yeah, and you'll fill in gaps and
Right.
whatnot.
But no embellishment. I don't feel like I need to tell a hunting story. I just have a lot of stories, so, I am a one-upper. But I just like to tell stories, and I hear somebody talk about, like, okay, so let's say somebody's talking about a deer hunting story, and I just all of a sudden, I can't wait to tell the story, not of mine. I don't have very few hunting stories, but I've been with Joel a bunch, and Joel's stories are crazy. So I tell the story. I always give him credit, but like Joel shot a deer, went to pick it up, and the deer was alive, jumped up and started running off. Joel chased it down, tackled it by the horns, and I think he stabbed it to death. He might have shot it, but so, who wouldn't want to tell that story when somebody's telling a great hunting story?
Yeah.
But I did have to back off in the back of my mind a little bit and realize, I'm a one-upper. But they're not made-up stories.
Right, yeah.
And so, like, Nate comes to mind sometimes because, I could come down and Nate would tell them these stories in class, and they'd come tell me, and I'd be like, scratching my head going, Nate, come on, dude. So I know Nate enough that he's just telling a tall tale sometimes, but they don't know that. And, that's the whole...
So I loved how Nate would always end them. He'd be like, and then I was sitting up on my stand, and I felt something just grabbing my leg. He was like, it just started pulling my leg, exactly like I'm pulling yours.
Yes.
Yeah, so sometimes I guess he'd leave that part out.
See, I'm not that clever. I cannot think of... like, I can tell fiction stories...
You're too honest.
But no, it's just I've got too many stories I think that are real and good about people I know and that and I think that's why a lot of times when I'm telling stories, people want to say, well, who is it? Well, it's usually because it's another alum. It might even be your mother or father that I taught, and I've taught a lot of people's parents.
Yeah.
I started teaching in 90.
Good
so
Lord.
If you're the Samahas, you want to know everything mom and dad did, and I got stories, but those stories, I can never use names. So I don't use names about my own stories sometimes,
Yeah.
But anyway, so going back to the AI, I just wanted to go off on Nate for a second. So what I did was I had my computer open on my phone, kind of like y'all are, putting this together. You're having to patch it all together.
Yeah.
So I open up something on my phone or on the computer, or I'll have two computers open. So as long as I can see the paper that was written by ChatGPT, I can read it in my mind while I'm talking it. I'm just saying it in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And I got better at it because I've done it like 3 or 4 times. And I haven't done it 1,000, but I think that, you could get so good at putting out something from ChatGPT and you could really just then paraphrase it on your own, knowing that you had to, well, if you just read it to yourself and were saying it, it would be more bursty and less predictable because you're putting yourself in it. And all of those that I did that to, 100% human written.
Really?
It was no work. So that's why I say, look, like it sounds like I'm saying, oh, students use this. No, far from it. I think I'm like you. Well, I think you're right. Teach kids how to use it correctly at some point. And, at some point, it's so ubiquitous and so good that the question's going to be, well, why do we need ourselves to answer any questions? But that's for our brains. That's for our development. We need it. And but the other thing would be is, at the younger age, I think I used to, and I really did, like I said, we need technology in the elementary. I think we do, but I don't think we need to be, other than the teachers I don't think they need to be tied in necessarily all the time to, the internet or the web, because it can teach an ability to rely on the easy way out. Teach them how to do it themselves really well.
The one way I think about it is like we have calculators, yet in elementary we still learn our times tables.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's like there are building blocks. So you get to a certain point where it's like everybody, like in high school, everybody's going to use it no matter what you tell them to do.
Right.
But at a younger age, you are looking at that child development. You're trying to develop that brain and you're trying to help it learn and teach it how to learn, really. At an early age, I think it's more important that these kids learn how to learn, and these kids are expanding their knowledge rather than.
So that's exactly what it's called.
Tools.
Learning how to learn, and then middle school is kind of taking your learning and then starting to apply it a little bit to maybe some real facts other than. But in high school, it's kind of a mini college, right?
Sure.
But even there's a lot of developmental stuff there, and if you get lazy, then I don't think that you are giving yourself the ability to, think about it. If I'm a parent, and I've seen this now as a parent, you want to be able to problem solve. And there's something else about all that. And I think this is tied to even kids in their education. Like, for instance, let's say Mac had come to me with some personal relationship with issue. And he needed some help with it. Dad, what should I do here? Well, I don't know, son. Let's go to ChatGPT 4, or 5 or 6. Well, first of all, it might give some really, because, you can prompt it, say, you can do crazy things with it. I am a 57-year-old father. I'm a Catholic, Roman Catholic Christian who lives in an ecumenical Christian community who we have these agreements, this and that. I could tell it a million things. And I say, from now on, when I ask you a question, give me the answers based on that kind of
through that lens, basically.
Through that lens. And I look at it, I might say, well, that's exactly what I would say. But at the same time, I think that, just like a teacher wants to see that a kid has done this stuff on his own so that you can kind of pat him on the back and say, hey, good thinking, way to see through that. And we're not talking about the simple stuff. I think, looking at Tony and Claire as math teachers, little different styles, both obviously incredible instructors. But I think Tony is way more comfortable with them just using calculators. Because, and Claire's probably a little less comfortable with them using calculators at certain parts of the development. And I think that, if we could prove it, we'd know for sure. But there is kind of a pragmatism to it, about, and the kids, what's the question kids always ask? Well, when am I ever going to use this again?
Yeah.
Well, it's true. You're not.
Have you seen Khan Academy's AI, though?
I have not.
So Khan Academy has an AI that literally, no matter what you're working on, if you ask it that, it'll ask you, what are you trying to do in the future?
That's good.
So say for instance, like you're learning about cells in biology, and it's like, hey, why do I have to use this? And it's like, well, what do you want to be in the future? And it says, I want to be I want to be like an athlete, like a professional athlete. And it says, well, you need to learn about cells in order to figure out how your body is going to break down the nutrition that you eat
that's
and
incredible.
Drink and things like that. So it really does kind of give you what's at stake through whatever your future is ahead of you or whatever you want your future to be. So that's super cool, I think.
As awesome as it all is, you do want people to develop and learn, and you could turn all your programming over to the computer or to the AI, but you don't want to do that.
Not necessarily, though.
No, right. You don't want to do that because one, it's not going to be as good as what you could maybe come up with.
Part of what you got to do is how you use chat. I don't use chat to prompt it and then it give me an answer and then I take that answer.
Right.
And I use it. I'm just trying to extract the basic understanding.
I think that's another good way to use it.
Because when it comes down to it, unless you had it in your brain completely aware of what you want, or unless you were just so perfect at perfectly describing what you want and everything, then it doesn't really know, and it kind of just tries, but the actual concept
it's been
there.
programmed.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say that somebody who's a programmer could think about, especially in AI, because I think I don't think, well, maybe my idea is a genius idea. Somebody could create an AI model, right, that we could use in schools. All right, let's take this example. I always use my son Mac as an example of this, and I'm probably being a little unfair to him, but I mean, I just based on his input to me and what I would ask his own friends, that he would say, Dan Funch hates me. Okay, as an example, right? And I say, well, why do you think that? And he said, just, what would happen is, this is what Paul Harmon would say. Well, Dennis, here's what's going on. Mac's doing a problem in class, maybe in trig, and he gets stuck. He didn't understand something. And instead of Mr. Funch taking over and solving the problem for him, what would a good teacher do? Well, Mac, or Dalen, what do you think you could do next? And that would where Mac's brain would go. I mean, it would make him mad, because you're not letting him off the hook. And I would think to myself, well, that's actually a good teacher. That's what I'd want Dan to do. And then, no, and don't let him off the hook. But, you're not trying to embarrass him either. You're trying to say, what do you think a next step would be? Well, all he has to do is say, any student, well, maybe I could, well, good, try that. Or, well, maybe that won't work. Or, let him try it and it doesn't work, and say, well, did that work? No, it didn't work. Well, so what if you created an AI that could be used in schools? Because how difficult is it? I mean, and again, this is a life skill as well, for students to ask hard questions of teachers. Why? They don't want to look like idiot.
Yeah.
The AIs, some of them have gotten so good that you can handwrite things, and then you input, like a picture of it, and it will kick out like architectural plans off your basic writing.
Oh, yeah.
But it'll also take your handwriting, as long as it's not the worst, and it'll be able to read that, those numbers, and it'll be able to take that. So you could be working out a math problem and get stuck, and the AI could say, oh, okay, good. You've done good so far. What would be your next step? And you could even probably, I think it's going to get good enough to where you could say to it, well, I think maybe I should, divide by, a factor of 3.
And now incorporate cameras.
That's what I'm saying.
And AR and glasses. And then you don't need to,
But
do anything.
It could become a great teacher and there's no, for the student, there's no rejection.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's a
Once
machine.
we're done here, I'm going to send you the keynote from Khan Academy. Sal Khan, he has like a TED Talk where he's talking about what the AI is that they're building.
Right.
And it's largely based off of exactly what you're talking about.
That is a great idea.
It's the Socratic method. It's like when the student gets something wrong, then it questions the student, like, why did you want to do that?
See, I was trying to think, okay, most AI is really just fun right now for me.
Yeah.
Now, I could see, like, if I was an accountant, if I was if I was in business, there are ways where I could use the AI to make me really productive. That's the way people are trying to show,
That's what Hayden's using it for.
Right. So that, and that's what I've showed Colleen and Carson is like, man, you guys you can do hours of work in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Give 5 prompts, it'll kick it out. And they're good. I mean, they're better than what you've come up with.
Invoices and things like that.
But what you just brought out that Khan was doing, and that guy, Sal, he's amazing. Is that to me is a really good use of it, because that is an end use. There you're taking and you're building the student's confidence by using a method that they're comfortable with, and also now, I guess the AI could be wrong, but it's not. But at least you're being prompted and asked questions. I like that it's prompting back.
Yeah.
That's
I think about that like the future of SAT. SAT's cracked at this point. Like, if you just sit there and do the work with Khan's AI, then you're just going to know the answer to every SAT question. So, and this is a problem I had as soon as I got into my first year of college. I already done the SAT and everything to get into college. And I watched a YouTube video the first year of college, and it said, it was literally just the blueprint of how to get a 1600 on the SAT. And if I had watched that before taking the SAT, there's no doubt in my mind I would have gotten at least like 1450 or higher. And it's really just doing the work and having feedback on your answers.
Now that, I think, that's the thing that today is so good. Like Claire, she helps a lot of students with SAT. It's a lot of work. That's why some students don't want to do it. It's just extra work and all that. But the problem I think about just doing all the I didn't even know what the SAT was before I took it.
Yeah.
If I would have just had SAT practice tests to do, like you, I think I could have done much better, and I did okay. I mean, but it's that feedback, and that's where, like I say, if you're doing the SAT and immediately afterward, you don't just get a grade, but it is explaining some of the more difficult questions, why the answer is the nuances of it.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful, I think, to the future of your scores.
Oh yeah, of course.
And as opposed to maybe just taking a bunch of tests that feel like, it's kind of like dead presidents. I mean, just taking a bunch of, it's like more work.
Well, it doesn't make any sense when you just like do the test and then 3 weeks later you get a grade. You don't know what that grade correlates to question wise.
Right.
On the paper, you have no clue what question you got wrong, what question you got right. And why.
Yeah, I think
Not
for
at all.
me, math would have been that because Dan was good for me. I mean, some people say, well, I don't understand Dan very much, but Dan.
Did you take Dan?
I did, and he could
Okay.
explain things fairly well, and my brain could get that. I could understand it. I wasn't the best mathematician, and of course, he wanted everybody to go be a math major, but but I did fairly well. And but if I had the kind of feedback that no teacher, unless you have a tutor.
Yeah.
No teacher has the time. I mean,
Yeah, that's what Sal Khan talks about.
Right,
Like,
they
no
don't-
teacher has the time to give
But-
individualized
but if you-
learning.
and going and getting something like, I use Mathway when I don't understand something when I'm helping my kids.
Yeah.
Now they usually say, Dad, I don't want just the answer. Well, I say, I'm not giving you the answer. You have every single step of that thing. So to me, if you're a serious student and you want to understand something, you do an example. And then you can see every step, right? Now, teachers go over the steps, but for some people, that's way too fast.
Yeah.
They can't keep up with all that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I speak really fast. I can slow down. I get a little more home, down home, I'm sure. But I think for a student to be able to go through and say, boom, and look at every step, well, sometimes even the steps aren't perfect.
Yeah.
But if the steps could be explained in language, that would really help people too. And so I think Khan is he's definitely
That's $1 billion
that's
idea.
a great idea, and I would use it for things that I don't understand.
Yeah.
I want to be prompted to think and, well, what about this? Oh, and that is what, like ChatGPT 4, when you do now on the Poe side of it, I don't think it does it on the regular ChatGPT 4, but on the Poe model, and I know it does it on Bing.
Yeah.
It'll, right after you prompt it and it gives you whatever the output is, it prompts you with 4 more questions.
Yeah.
So there are things that it thinks that you should be thinking about, and I think that's a really good way to to use the model. I think it's going to cause like any new thing, it's kind of like the printing press. I don't think we can throw it out. I mean, the printing press caused millions of deaths in some sense in Europe. And all the religious wars were fueled by the ability for people to read things that they couldn't have read before.
And millions of jobs were lost.
Sure.
But not really lost because
But
they moved into
right,
something
all new
different.
technology, the telephone, the television, all those things.
Well, I mean, in America, we had the industrial age.
Right.
That was giant.
Things that make us more efficient, even though they might create more work for
Yeah.
someone else, but that's a blessing.
Yeah.
More work means more people can,
True.
but I think that the AI will be like that as well.
I think so too. And I don't think if you don't get good at using it now, you're probably going to be left behind.
So that's why I want the students to play with it. There are a lot of toys they can play with, in AI that'll still teach them that prompting model and the input, output, and how to fine tune that. Because I think that's what it's all about, is the people who are going to make money on it and use it the best are the people who are most able to fine tune the answers that they get.
Yeah.
Because if you just take the first answer, you're just being lazy, just like it's kind of like getting a wrong question on your homework. Well, I did it.
Yeah.
But if you're right. If people who, I think that's the same thing. I think we ought to have technology for younger kids not because the technology is so important in and of itself, but because they are going to get left behind if they don't know how to use it. And, you can argue that all day long, but the truth is we live in a technological world and we're not going to go all live out in the swamp.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think if you act like it's not going to affect you, that's just detrimental to yourself.
That is naive.
see, I grew up in
Yeah.
a time where, the great evils were the telephone on the wall, the television in the home, the radio, movies. And, I can agree that there are things and ideas and things that can come out of that are detrimental to our, maybe our spiritual life, our social life, even our physical life. We can just sit there and watch it all day and get fat. But at the same time, where would what's the name of The Chosen? I'm a Chosen. You might. Have you ever watched any of the Chosen?
Yeah, I've watched a little bit.
Of course, I like it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't. That'd be a whole nother conversation if you didn't, because to me, it's so well done. But the whole idea behind The Chosen isn't necessarily just how well done it is, but its ability to be evangelistic. Well, it wouldn't be evangelistic if we didn't have the internet, if we didn't have television, we didn't have movies where people could actually see this. So there's good in all those things, and there's always going to be the temptation toward the bad, but they're just tools.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is that we're all, pulled towards things we shouldn't be pulled towards.
Yeah, what you're saying is right, you hit the nail on the head when you said when you were little, everything like the phone on the wall, the TV over there was all like bad things,
Well, they had the potential to be bad.
Yeah,
they were the new evil.
Exactly, the new evil. They have the potential to be bad. I think it all comes down to the home where your parents have to say, hey, you're not going to watch that. There's just a whole half of the internet you're never going to visit, because that's just not what we're about.
See, I think I could give you what the most dramatic and dramatically bad invention of the modern age was, and it would be different than most people would probably say.
What's your idea?
I think it's the car.
Really?
And the reason is because, yes, I can get on the phone and talk to people, right?
Sure.
And I can spew ideas, but a lot of if we're talking about sin at the idea of maybe. Most of it is physical. There's a lot of mental too. But the car took people and gave them this unfettered freedom. Well, the car and other types of transportation, but the car was very personal.
Yeah.
Most people just don't get on an airplane and go somewhere. Most people don't just get on a train and go somewhere. But the car is yours.
Yeah.
Even the bicycle was probably revolutionary.
Oh, for sure.
But the idea that, my kid, I can go to sleep and he can go wreak havoc. And I wouldn't even know it. I could be the next day, he could be doing terrible things for him and to other people. And, so I think the car is, but again, we would never get rid of the car.
Yeah.
Because it's also done so many good things as well. But I think if we weighed the good, and same thing, like I think when we look at AI and all the doomsday stuff. Now, I'm just going to say this. I'm not smart enough to understand why they really think that, that it's like the movies, this thing's going to take over and, shoot nuclear missiles at people or even that it's going to sell everybody on false ideas. I think the last election cycle probably ruined us on all that. But I think that it's just a tool. I don't know that we'll totally ever tame it, but we haven't tamed the car either. I mean, it still is killing people all over the place.
It's killing people, yeah.
Well, I mean, like who's killing?
Yeah, exactly. Guns kill people.
Well, did you see? All right, so this is an internet show. You've seen the video. You had to have seen this one, where the lady's driving down the road in her little, subcompact. There's a truck on her right, and the truck's driver's side front tire comes off, goes across in front of her car, and she hits that tire, and her car flips like twice in the air and lands on the roof. And you think she's dead. Well, it turns out she really wasn't all that hurt. But,
wow.
Well, in that sense, the car killed somebody, it wasn't the driver, or maybe it was the mechanic, but... so I think there's doomsday about everything.
Yeah.
But I think as far as tools go, it can be a real powerful tool.
Yeah.
And
Wow, well, that's a great way to end it. Do you want to plug anything before we get out of here?
Hey, I wore this shirt, right? So every year, the new spring, or we are being filmed for a minute. I forgot that. Here we go. I wore the spring
idea.
sprint. We'll have another one next April for the senior class, and I guess I'm going to have to turn around and put all of our, who are these?
Our sponsors.
The sponsors on there. There you go. So you got out on the World Wide Web. I did that on purpose just to just a little plug there.
Now they all owe us money. No, that's for Bubba. Alrighty. Well, without further ado, let me go ahead and plug our Instagram at the Minimum Wage Pod.
Yep. And be sure to watch our Clips channel at MWP Clips.
And this has been
the Minimum Wage Podcast.
Where the name is above our pay grade.
Peace.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.